It's been a long time coming, but today I'm finally going to introduce you to the Impala. So I'm heading down to Fort Lauderdale to go pick up my car that I've owned for about 24 years. Let's go get her. Hell yeah. I'm snap talking.
What you saying? It's about fucking time.
So we're loaded up on the trailer. We had some starting difficulties. The car's been sitting for a hot minute, so most likely the gas got kind of gummy in there. So we're going to get that drained and refilled. But you can see her back there on the trailer. Let's get rolling. So my obsession with this car started back in the 90s when I was in high school. The very young, impressionable me saw this car come out in 1994 in an ad in Motor Trend that just said, Lord Vader, your car is ready, which was pretty much, hit all of my major, sticking points for a car, something that Vader would drive himself. In 94, when these came out, I think they were sold for around $27,000, which is like a steal right now, considering this had an LT1 engine. Pretty much the only thing that Chevy offered in this power would be a Corvette, a Camaro, and this. When the car was first tested in Motor Trend, they said it was going to have a 502 with a 6-speed. And what actually came out was an LT1 engine with a automatic transmission. And I'm pretty sure the reason they did that was they didn't really want to take any sales away from Corvette or from Cadillac, because this would have killed all of their sales, because it's a much more practical car. Obviously, when I was a kid, I had no chance of buying this car. At the time, I was actually driving my 280Z, not the one I own now, but a different one. So it's kind of funny that years later I rebought another one of those, and I still have the Impala though. This was actually, I want to say this was my third car I owned. No, sorry, fourth car that I owned. So I owned my 280Z, and then I owned my 1990 Thunderbird Super Coupe, and then I bought a GMC Sonoma for a little bit, and then this was the next car that I bought. At that point in time when I purchased this, I think I bought it in 1998, so I would have been, I wasn't 21 yet. I was 20, and because my birthday's at the end of the year, and I bought it in July. It was a couple years old at that point. The previous owner had put about 30,000 miles on it, I think, when I bought it. And I bought it from a local Chevy dealership in the area. Actually, this wasn't the original car that I bought. I've actually technically owned two of these. I bought a 95 first. And when I bought the car, I went into the dealership, and the dealer wouldn't even talk to me. He just assumed I was a kid and I couldn't afford the car and he was going to be wasting his time. Meanwhile, I had a really good job at the time, so I was actually able to afford it pretty easily. I didn't have any bills. I lived at home. It was, a no-brainer. And as I was leaving the lot, back in 1998, I actually had my own cell phone, so which was kind of rare back then. So as I'm walking out of the dealership, I call the manager on my way out the door, and When I got a hold of the manager, I'm like, I'm leaving your lot right now because your salesperson doesn't want to sell me the car. He thinks he's wasting his time. So the manager came rushing out, caught me in the parking lot. We talked for a little bit, and then he basically, went and reamed the salesperson's ass for not, at least letting me test drive the car. He was basically saying, like, you can't test drive the car. We don't let people just joyride test drive the car. Meanwhile, I have a check in my pocket ready to, not purchase the car outright, but put a huge down payment down on it. He gives me the keys. I walk out. I drive the car. I end up coming right back like 10 minutes later, drop the keys on his desk. I'm like, I don't want your car. Piss off, basically, because I was just mad at that point that I didn't want to deal with that dealership. So at this point, I couldn't really find any Impalas in the area, so I was pretty much stuck with this one from the dealership that I didn't want to deal with. I ended up going back there, and I spoke with the manager for a little bit. He ended up giving me the price I was asking for on the car. I had traded in my truck and, walked away with the Impala. Super happy, drove the car home. One of my uncles was over my house. He is a car detailer, and I was showing him the car, and he walked up to it and took 2 looks at it, and he said, "Oh, that car's been in an accident." And I was like, "What do you mean? There's nothing on?" At the time, I don't know if it was a Carfax, but there was something that was available to show, insurance damage at the time. And I said there was nothing on the title. It was clear. And he said, "No, look at this." And he started showing me around the trunk, and he showed me where the quarter panel of the trunk had been replaced. And so, I was livid. So I took it back to the dealership and I said, "This car's been hit." And I proceeded to show the dealer now, here's where the new spot welds were. Here's where they replaced the seam sealer. And he was like, "We didn't know. They must have replaced it without telling us." But regardless, I'm like, I don't want a car that's been damaged. I don't know if there's other frame damage or what's going on with it. He then tells me, he says, "Well, I have a 96 on the lot. Do you want that one?" And, at this point, I'm like, I'm paying a little bit more than I really wanted to pay for the car. But I really want the car, and I'm like, "No, just give me my truck back. I don't want it." Well, I think they had already started to do some work on my truck. My truck had needed a little bit of things here and there, and I think they had ordered a tailgate and got some other stuff going on the truck. And so I don't know if they had some money wrapped up in it or what the issue was, but they ended up turning around and saying, "We're going to give you the 96 for basically the exact same price as they're going to give me the 95. And the 96 had lower miles on it. And I was basically just like, "Well, why the hell didn't you give me that car in the first place?" So I don't know. Regardless, I was able to get the 96. That's this car. Originally, when I purchased this car, it was dark cherry metallic. I always wanted a black one, but we were never really able to find a black one. Again, they were so limited at the time because when I was looking, they were only about 2 years old, so none of them were really coming off leases yet. They were still wrapped up in 36-month lease, and on top of that, people just kept them. They were really good, reliable cars. And I've had it for, so if I purchased it in July of July in 1998. So today, as of right now, is May 20th or so, May 20th, 2023. So do the math. It's about 25 years almost I've owned this car in a couple months. So now one of the problems that I had is I was constantly driving this on the highway. So I would drive from my house to work was maybe 20, 30 miles at the time, one way. And then at night, I would go downtown to the downtown area where I live. That trip alone, I was putting almost 100 miles on this car round trip daily. Which at the time, gas was super cheap. It was $20. It was $20 to fill the gas tank. It was 99 cents a gallon. It wasn't that big of a deal running back and forth, but after a while, I decided, okay, now I have to get a second car to offset some of the mileage I was putting on this one. So I ended up buying another Z. So I ended up buying another 280Z, this one, 280ZX. I bought an 83. I drove that for, I don't know, maybe 6 months, 7 months before the motor locked up and blew up in that one. But that was my daily driver to work, and then I would take the Impala out when I got home and take it downtown or wherever I wanted to go with it. So I put a lot of miles on this car in the first few years that I owned it. And then after that, I started getting in this habit of buying other cars. I had a truck for a little while that I would drive around instead of the Impala, and the Impala would just start to come out with me when I went out or when I wanted to take it somewhere that wasn't driving back and forth to work. One of the biggest drawbacks was because this car drove on the highway all the time, every time I went to go change lanes or accelerate, it would shift between third and fourth gear. After owning the car for, I don't know, maybe a year to 2 years, I lost third and fourth gear. So I was driving down the highway and all of a sudden the car tried to shift from third into fourth and it just free spun and that was it. And I just was left with, 1, 2, and 3. I took the car to a transmission shop that was reputable in the area, and they said, listen, we're going to rebuild the transmission, and we're going to do it just as good as the Corvette. We're going to put the Corvette servos in and Kevlar bands and a bunch of stuff that I didn't really know at the time what they were doing to it, but they assured me that it would be much beefier, it would be able to handle the car, and especially that third four shift. So, at the time, they also suggested that I install the higher stall torque converter, which I did, which may have been part of the problem as well, because about a month after having that transmission rebuilt, maybe 2 months, it died again. Same problem, third and fourth gear. So I took it back to that transmission shop. They rebuilt it one more time and got back on the road. 1 month later, transmission went out again. I start looking through the magazines. I find Summit Racing has a TCI Street Fighter transmission that's supposed to handle 700 horsepower and all this other stuff. So I purchased that transmission. So at this point, I'm out the initial money that I spent on the transmission, and I'm also out like one reinstall, or the torque converter basically. They didn't charge me for the rebuild since it was within like 60 days. So I ended up saying, don't rebuild that transmission. I ordered a TCI Street Fighter. I think it cost like $1,700 at the time. We had it installed, and about a month later, transmission went out again. I don't know what it was about this 4L60. Let me know below if you've had a similar issue with your 4L60, but it basically wouldn't work in this car as far as I'm concerned, or wouldn't work with me driving in the car. Maybe I'm really aggressive on it, like that guy. Maybe I'm just too aggressive on the transmission, I don't know. At the time, there was a guy who, I think they've since sold the company, but the company still exists. It was a guy named Josh who created a conversion kit to change it to a 6-speed, to a T56 6-speed. And I believe the original company name was Big Fast Car. I ended up working with Josh and building his website for him in exchange for the parts for the kit that I needed. That included the cross member and a few other hard parts. And then I went out and purchased my own transmission and some of the other parts that were necessary to make the conversion, including the pedal assembly out of a Camaro, and got it all running and driving. Now, the problem that I've had is for the last, I don't know, 20 years almost, I've had an engine light. And the engine light is basically just saying we don't know where your transmission is, so it doesn't know what to do, but it doesn't affect any of the drivability of it. What it does affect is that I changed the rear end gears to 373s, so the transmission was a 97 Camaro transmission with the 373 gears in the back. So when I'm driving down the street, my speedometer is reading about 30 miles an hour, but I might be doing 60. So I just have to keep an eye on that when I'm driving. I pretty much just go with the flow of traffic anyway, so that's never too big of an issue. I installed the stereo system, headers, and I made some other upgrades to the car. I drove it around like this for years, and then the problem started happening. So I had to pause on recording that video. It was getting too dark out and too many mosquitoes out here. It's a few weeks later. I actually had to go get Kiki from the port and do all of that stuff. So that was all filmed before I had the K-Truck. And so we're going to get back into the Impala. So here's a quick rundown of all the stuff I've done to the Impala in the last 25 years. The first major mod was the interior. 90s gray GM carpet. Looks like you rubbed dead fish all over it after about 2 years of use. It turns all green and gray and it just looks kind of gross. So we replaced that with black carpet. At the same time, I had a little tear on the side of my driver's seat, so I had that all repaired too, and I had all the interior redone in black and gray leather. We also redid the bottom of the dash and the door panels in black as well. I put some MagnaFlow mufflers on it and some Trans Am double down pipes on the side. The MagnaFlows still look as good as they did the day they went on the car, but the pipes need to be replaced because they actually rusted apart because we reused the old factory steel. I put extended trailing arms on the car, which actually center the rear wheel in between the wheel arch. From the factory, all the rear wheels sat forward a little bit too far. I also put lowering springs on the car, 1.5 inches I think all the way around, and an Inland Empire aluminum drive shaft, which is no longer on the car because the end split off of it and went flying down the highway. That actually ended up on my Model A, so now it has the factory drive shaft back in it again. It's not the fastest thing in the world, but with the 6 speed in it and the 373 gear, it's much faster now, and it's much more reliable without that 4L60E piece of garbage. And on a side note, my Suburban that has a 4L65E transmission just died as well with the same third-fourth problem. So as far as problems go, I had a little boo-boo with the car back around 2001, 2002. I was driving next to a parking bollard, which was too low to the ground for me to see past my rearview mirror and my side mirror, and I actually scraped it up along the side of the car. It just got the back quarter panel, but it actually scratched and dented the whole thing from the bumper all the way to the tire. So while I was at it, I decided to make some bigger body modification. I've always loved Lincoln Continentals, and I love the idea of suicide doors on a big sedan. Now, I'd never seen them done on an Impala before, even though there were some kits being advertised for Impalas. They all required massive bodywork. It wasn't like it was a bolt-in kit. So nobody had actually ever done it. So as far as I knew, my car was going to be the first suicide door car. So I went to talk to my buddy Bobby, who owns Mad Mods down in Fort Lauderdale. Now, at the time, he was just a friend of a friend, and I went in there and asked him for some price estimates and to see if this was something he could do. He said a bunch of people had asked him before to do it, but nobody had actually followed through. At the time, he was doing all the cars where people would have suicide trunks or doors or hoods open up weird. And he also did crazy paint jobs on cars and just basically anything customizing the exterior look of the car. So we did end up ordering a similar kit to what was supposed to be available, supposed to be for the Impala. It's a double hinge for both sides. It actually looks similar to like what you put on like an old hot rod, but it's really made for that type of a car with a really light door, and these doors aren't light at all. One thing that we did, and he asked me at the time about it, was there's a little lip that's on the inside edge of the rear door. And so on an Impala or Caprice, when the back door closes, it kind of like scoots behind the front door. And I guess this is more for like a seal, like a wind seal or something like that. But on a suicide door installation, that lip would prevent you from being able to open the back door prior to opening the front door. So you would have to open the front door up and then you could open the back door up. And that's how my doors were originally. I figured it was like kind of a safety issue and it would be good to have it that way in case somebody tried to open a door up on the highway. It would stop the door from flying open, which is what Bobby told me when he asked me whether I wanted to keep that little lip or not. And I said, well, let's keep the lip for now. I think it's probably a safer way to go. Actually, the body shop that he worked with or worked out of actually did the fender repair. Oddly enough, the same fender repair that I returned to the other 95 car for. And then Bobby went ahead and did the suicide doors. We also went ahead and moved the handles from the back of the door to the front of the door because, in my opinion, if you're going to do suicide doors, you want people to know it's suicide doors. Everybody kept asking, why don't you shave the handles? And at the time, that was like a really big thing. And I hate shaved handle doors. I want to be able to get into my car without having to use a remote or a popper or something like that. And the second reason is that it just looks better that way. It looks more like an old Lincoln where the door handles are next to each other. So I drove the car like this for years, no worries. The transmission worked great, the interior looked great, and the doors were fine on the car. So one day on March 6, 2008, I was on the way over my dad's house for his birthday party. And as I was driving there, where he lived were all a lot of, straight north, south, east, west road. I started very far east and had to get very far west, and I kept kind of jogging up the roads as I made my way over. And I kept wanting to go over one more road. So I just kept driving down the same road I was on, always wanting to jump over because traffic was bad and it was just a shitty day out. And then sure enough, some lady decided to try to cut across traffic in the middle of a rainstorm across, 6 lanes and smashed right into the side of the Impala. When she did this, she hit my passenger side panel. She started at the front fender and worked her way all the way back to the rear fender, basically destroying every panel, the B-pillar in the car. She basically just nailed all of it. And when she did that, she actually put me sideways, and then I hit the median on the driver's side and took out both rims on this side, breaking the back axle. And then I jumped that curb and then proceeded against the other side of the, back to the same side of the street I was on, but opposite side now, out of the fast lane into the slow lane. And landed up against the curb. So we pretty much thought the car was going to be totaled. I was furious. I mean, at this point, I'd still owned the car for about 10 years now. But, it is what it is. It's a car. I wasn't going to, I was pretty mad. I was really mad. It was, again, another example of somebody else's ignorance causing, a problem for me. So, welcome to the world now. So in any event, I didn't have the coverages that I needed on the car to protect the value of what it was. And so in the same way that my Buick got hit last year, the insurance company didn't want to give me what I felt the car was worth. There was no accounting for the suicide doors. There was no accounting for the transmission. Just the low miles that were on the car at the time. Another word to the wise, if you're going to have a collector car like this or something that you put a lot of money into, get it insured properly for some sort of an agreed upon value. I didn't have that on this car at the time, so I again went through her insurance company to try to get what I felt was fair for the car. And the one big thing that they kept doing was trying to value my car as a Caprice, not an Impala, because on the titles in Florida, most Impalas will say Caprice on the title. There are a lot of clone Impalas out there that are not real Impalas, they are Caprices. This is not one of them. The title does not necessarily designate what the car is. There's one spot on the car that actually shows you whether it's an Impala or a Caprice, and I'll show you that to you right now. The only thing that says that it's an Impala is this little code right here that says WX3. So as long as this sticker is pure on your Impala and your trunk lid hasn't been replaced, you probably have an actual Impala. Anything past that, you're not really sure. Because they are pretty much identical to a Caprice. So while I was going back and forth with them fighting over what the car was and what it was valued at, I said, I don't even care what you guys are doing right now. Where's my car at? Because they had towed it to one of their lots. And so it's sitting on their lot in Fort Pierce, and I'm in Lake Worth at the time. And I said, bring my car back to me. Get it out of your lot right now, because we're just going to have to take this to court over what you're valuing the car at. I got it to my friend's shop. He actually had a wrecked Impala at his shop, and he was able to actually replace the fender, the doors, and the B-pillar with all factory Impala parts. So it is, on that side, still an Impala. He also had a rear axle for it, so we were able to replace the axle. So he began doing all that work. Called Bobby up because somebody had to do the suicide doors. So once they got the car all bolted together, nobody could put that new rear door on the car because it needed all the adjustments made that Bobby had done. He had moved to Orlando. So he was up in Orlando for a little while, and then he had decided he was actually going to move back to Fort Lauderdale. So I caught him kind of in this transition phase, and I said, let me know when you're back in Fort Lauderdale, basically. And he said, yeah, I'll let you know. And so the car ended up sitting in my garage unfinished for, basically, I think the better part of almost a year. So as far as the insurance company goes, I basically called them up and said, listen, I have a bill here, including what Bobby was going to charge me to do the repairs. The car is worth $20,000. Prove me wrong. There was tons of examples of them online of what they cost. And, it's an Impala. You have to value it as an Impala. They finally agreed that yes, it was an Impala, and yes, it was worth about $20,000. So they basically were going to cut me a check for that amount. And then right around that time, I found out that I couldn't get the wheels that I had for the car anymore. So I had to get a whole new set of all 4 wheels instead of just the 2. And when I did that, they said, oh, well, now the value of the car is, $500 more than 75%. And in Florida, if you exceed 75% of the value of the car, they just total the whole thing. So they were basically trying to total the car at that point. So I said, listen, forget what I just said. Just give me the check for what the repairs are. I'll sign whatever the hell you need me to sign. That basically just says I release you from any, responsibility going forward on the vehicle. And I'm going to repair, and the car's repaired. At that point, the car was basically repaired with the exception of the work Bobby had to do. They agreed, I agreed, we signed the paperwork. They cut me a check for whatever it was. Now I'm just waiting on Bobby. Bobby finally came back down, picked up my car, brought it to his shop, and started working on it. It took him a while to get the repairs done, and when he did finally start getting into it, we decided at this point we're going to do a color change. I always wanted the black car. I could never get the black car, so now I get the black car. And it made a good excuse because we were painting, so we had to repaint. Even the Impala fenders that were put on the car were still not in perfect shape, so those were going to have a paint job anyway to them. Or rather than just paint the right side of the vehicle, we just decided to paint the whole thing. And now what we did was we painted it black with a granite gray. It's a granite grigio is the color. It's a Ferrari and a Maserati color. And then the pinstripe in silver is actually painted in a Mercedes silver. And then the bottom part is just the standard GM black. You did a great job on the color change. The pin lines actually run inside the doors. You did a really good job on that. And so now I have a black car finally. So now with the color change, I also asked Bobby to do a very specific thing for me. I hated the fact that I couldn't open the back door, like I said before. Even though it was a great security feature to stop people from opening the door on the highway, it never happened once. Nobody ever rides in my back seat, so there was no reason for me to keep that little lip on the car. And so I wanted to be able to open the rear door independent of the front door. When you open these doors up, that little lip would have sat previously behind this part of the driver's door. The other issue is that you can theoretically collide these doors together. You can see it actually happened one time before, where I probably wasn't paying attention, and there's a little scratch right here. So this door has to come open fully before this door can get out of the way. So either way, you kind of have to be careful, but the big benefit is that you can open the back door without having to worry about opening the front door. So when Bobby was repairing and replacing everything with the car, I said, get rid of that lip. I hate it. Let's just have it where you can open the back doors independently of the front and they don't get in the way. The other problem is when he redid the suicide door hinges, he could no longer get that double hinge that he got previously. It just wasn't available anymore, and now the hinges weren't going to match. So he ended up replacing both hinges with a new, more modern hinge. This is a one solid billet hinge, and it's a lot more adjustable, and it holds a lot more weight. So I drove the car around like this for a few years. It was perfect. Everything was fine. When the accidents happened, I just didn't want it floating around, you know, in people's shops and have somebody break into it and steal stuff out of it. So I had actually pulled out pretty much all the speakers and amps and everything out of the car. I did still have a head unit and just the standard speakers in there. When I got it back, I finally decided to put a new head unit into the car. So I spent all day installing a head unit. It took me all day. I made everything nice and clean and buttoned everything up. At some point in time, I opened the back door that I can do without having the front door open now. And I tossed something into the back seat, and then I closed the door. And when I closed it, I heard it not really click all the way. If you close the door, but you don't close it like fully, if you don't like slam the door, it'll actually just kind of catch. So it kind of closed like that, and I heard it when it happened, and I didn't think about it to just close it all the way. So here is where Bobby's little bit of advice of not shaving that lip comes in. I'd been working on the car all day, and the doors were open, and the battery had kind of drained down a little bit, and I was playing with the radio. So I said, let me go drive the car around the block and kind of let the alternator recharge the battery some. So I got in the car, and I put it in gear, and I drove up my driveway, and as I drove up my driveway, the rear door opened up because it wasn't latched all the way, and it caught a pole that was installed for my gate. It caught the door and it ripped it completely backwards and actually touched and kissed the back fender. Ripped 180 degrees out of place and basically ruined the back quarter again and destroyed the door again. So here we are again, no door, and I basically just rolled the car back into the garage, and I closed the garage door, and I didn't even want to look at it. Made the call to Bobby again. At least he's down here in Fort Lauderdale now, so I was able to call him and say, Bob, I need to get the car in again. I fucked up. Got the car down to him. Was able to find another door at a junkyard. I basically had to get a yellow taxi door at this point because there's no Impalas that I can find that had a door. He did a full repaint on the door, got the door back on, got the fender repaired, got everything all ready to go. But he had, I believe, actually had another guy working for him at the time, and whoever had done the work on the car maybe didn't do the best work. When I moved from that house that the accident happened at, and in between that and when I brought the car up here, this general area is a lot more Florida, a lot swampier, it's a lot wetter, and in general the car just sees a lot more moisture throughout the day. And so in that door, all of the paint started failing. It started not adhering. I don't know what the step was that was missed or not done properly. It just started failing. So I took it back to Bobby, and he, took a paint scraper to it, and it just ran it down the side of the car, and all the paint just popped off the door. At some point in time, I also had a problem where the person that did that work decided to run the wires for the door handle through the bottom of the hinge instead of the top of the hinge, and it almost caused a little fire in the car. That's all been fixed since then. Bobby redid all the paint. He actually ended up painting the entire car just to make sure there was no other issues. And I still have a couple little paint imperfections here and there. The car's actually filthy again right now because of the gap in time between me filming the first part of this video and the second part of this video. And where we're at right now is I want to restore this car back to what it used to be. But right now the biggest problem is all the plastics are failing. So my dash vent has basically disintegrated into the dash. We were able to suck all the pieces out, but I have a replacement for that. You can see all the metal here is starting to tarnish. Inside here, this is probably the only bezel on a B-body in existence that hasn't broken. I don't know how it hasn't, but every single other one has. So I have a replacement for this one that I'm working on right now. And then these have all broken, and that one has broken. This is pretty common with all Chevy products from the 90s and probably newer ones too, but these have broken off. I've replaced this switch, I can't tell you how many times. This panel is cracked here. This dashboard is cracked right here, and I'm missing this piece, but I bought an entire new lower dash panel from another car. It's red right now, but mine's black anyway. I color changed it from gray. Usually everything in a Impala, this whole lower half, this piece, the entire interior in an Impala is gray. There's not a piece of black on it except for the bezel that sits around the gauges, these bezels as well. But even my seats are starting to crack now. The leather is starting to tear. And, you know, it's just old leather. It hasn't been conditioned properly. My dash cracked here where it just fell apart. And, you know, some of this stuff can be repaired, and I actually did repair this. When I took this dash out to install the double din, a bunch of these pieces up here broke, and I re-glued everything and re-epoxied everything together. But it's just still, you know, it's just old and it's gonna fall apart. So we're gonna replace all this stuff. Like I said, I have a new piece. I just have to decide if I'm gonna cut this out or just order a new one from the guy that sold me the kit. And then we're just gonna replace and restore all this stuff. I already did the restoration on the center console here. So my center console, of course, has a stick in it, and we made a nice little cup holder here. I got rid of the side carpet and used the same stuff that I used in the stereo in the back. And I will have a video on doing the stereo install in this car. I did a pretty decent low buck, you know, stereo installation. The guy that I bought this dashboard off of, I was actually able to get all of the door panels as well. So I have replacement door panels, but what I'm gonna do is make a better version of this whole lower section. But I really want to just make this one fiberglass piece or one something else. These constantly suck because everybody grabs this to close the door instead of the actual door handles. So these are always broken off, and they make these little trim pieces to fix them. But frankly, I'd rather just like replace this whole lower section door panel. I'd like to get different switches. The switches control the seat right here, and then these control all the windows. But I really am thinking about replacing the seats with maybe like a Cadillac CTS Recaro seats. I can get the fronts. The backs aren't going to match right for the width because this is such a wider car than a CTS, but I can probably use filler panels on the ends. I don't know. That's my thought process right now. But if I do that, I believe the seat control moves to the seat itself and gets off of this door panel. So then at that point, I just need a set of window switches to control the windows and then something for the door lock. So I may rework this entire door panel, but I have those backup door panels as a way of being able to either modify these or modify those. Even the back seats leather started cracking right here. It's time. It needs a restoration. Second part of the restoration that I would like to do is the engine. We already have the 6-speed, and it runs great with the 6-speed in it, and it runs great with an LT1 engine. This engine has about only about 120,000, 130,000 miles on it. It's really not much. In an Impala trim, I think they made 265, I think. 265 horsepower. So, you know, I have a K&N airbox, and I have exhaust onto the car as well. That's about it. Nothing's really crazy on it. I used to have headers on the car, but the headers melted everything in the engine bay. So you can see my old alarm is all melted over here. And then all this stuff has heat wrap on it because it basically overheated everything. So we're probably just going to, at some point in time, take this motor out and just put an LS motor in it. I know it's an LS and everybody does them and they get kind of boring, but it needs an LS in it. I don't know what else you would put in it. I could go crazy 502 or something nuts, but the car is already super fun to drive with the stick and 260 horsepower. So my thought is to go LS2. It's a nice, reasonable 400 horsepower, nothing crazy. With a stick, the car's going to be a blast to drive. So I don't think I need to go too much crazier than that. So that will be among the projects that's worked on eventually. And hopefully I'll have it on this channel. Or maybe I'll just do it and it'll just show up one day. Done. So that's the Impala. It's a love-hate relationship I have with this car. As long as it's up and running, I'm happy with it. The air conditioning's not working right now, so I got to get that fixed. So if you have any questions about why I keep this car after all the mayhem, let me know below. So the next video on this car will probably be fixing the dash and actually installing the radio. Hopefully once my garage is finished, I'll have the space to actually do the repairs that need to be done on it properly. Same thing with the 60 Buick. The 60 has to get blown apart. I got to take windshields out, all that type of stuff to do some rust repair. I just got a text message that they're coming to start the forming for the concrete, so that'll be nice. In between that, we might jump onto one of the other cars. I have an update on the Buick coming soon. I was able to locate the proper fender for the car. So once that gets here, we'll have an update on that, hopefully, where I can start the paint and body work on that car. And I'm sure I'll have some updates on Kiki and the mini truck too. Seems everybody loves those videos the best. So, and I don't know, maybe we'll have some other surprises. I did buy another 280Z, but it's a piece of shit. Nobody wants to see that. Anyway, I appreciate you guys watching, and be sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any comments on the Impala, let me know, or on any future videos. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.